Hi everyone, Shafiq here. Now that you know why testing our problem assumption is important, we're going to pivot to answering questions submitted by founders. Steven, are you ready with our first question?
Yep, I got it right here. Okay, our first question, Shafiq, comes from an entrepreneur who's been working on their startup for the past 6 months and is struggling to generate leads. It seems that they were about to hire a marketing agency until they watched the first episode of Billion Lean. And according to my notes here, apparently it actually was one of their advisors who shared the episode with this founder. Very cool. And thank you to your advisor for watching and sharing. This founder thought they'd reach out to us for help before signing a contract and making a financial commitment to a marketing agency of several thousands of dollars. So anyway, here's their question. Their question is, I'm having a hard time reaching my prospects in my target market. What should I do to change this outcome?
Okay, that's a good question. So reaching prospects cost effectively is part of the challenge you as a founder have to solve. So let's kind of break this down, okay? There are really kind of three different things. I'm going to kind of go through them in detail. So let's start with the first one. Do you have reach? Now, when we talk about reach, do you have the ability to engage your identified target market segment? So as an example, if you're just out of college and your initial target market is the Defense Department and you're trying to sell weapon systems, right? So the people that you need to interview are the guys who use these, specifically generals in charge of weapon systems, the field commanders and so on. Now, if you're not in the military or if you don't have that pedigree, you're gonna have an awful hard time trying to reach those people, right? So you're just not gonna be successful starting off with your idea in that target segment. So if the underlying technology, let's say, is accuracy of guidance systems or something, you have to figure out how to improve that product in a different adjacent market. Okay, so reach is really important. And just to kind of elaborate on that, what I mean by reach is, while that idea may be perfect for an ex-general or a current special ops person to pursue, you're not the right person to do it. And maybe the best thing for you is to kind of partner with somebody, a co-founder who does have that reach. Okay, so reach is the first component. Do you have an affinity to the target segment market, and do you understand them, and will they pick up the phone when you call them? Like, do you have standing with them? All right, so that's part one. Part two of the reach question goes down to, are you targeting the right market segment? So once again, in the Department of Defense, they're not the right segment if you're trying to, in other words, if you've got a guidance system, wrong people to start off with, you might want to figure out how to get into virtual cycle fast. So let's kind of go back to episode 1 when Steven talked about SpaceX. Now SpaceX, their long-term vision was to go to Mars. Of course, they couldn't start all of a sudden selling tickets to Mars. Who's going to jump on a rocket ship when these guys haven't even reached orbit yet, right? So they couldn't really target NASA either. NASA was going to pick up the phone and say, oh yeah, guys, help launch our astronauts when you haven't launched anything. So that's not the initial target market. And interviewing and trying to launch humans when it's a very risky, I mean, let's face it, who wants to kill humans when we're trying to launch them? We all remember the Endeavor, or I can't remember, it was the Enterprise, which shuttle crashed, right? So it's a very risky proposition. So what does SpaceX do? They didn't try to launch humans as the first thing. They found an adjacent market. They figured out that the real problem that all these players had, as Steven mentioned in episode 1, was cost. And they knew that if they could refine their rockets fast enough, because there were plenty of people who needed satellites launched every year. They could do dozens of launches. And if they figured out a business model, they could even do their own launches, which is what they're pursuing right now. They can pretty much launch a vehicle a week now. And just recently, they ended up actually launching humans. They were able to meet that initial goal, but it was 15 years after they set out to go, after they launched their startup. So it's not like we're telling you can't keep your vision in mind, but you have to figure out what are the appropriate milestones that'll help you get your vision executed. So SpaceX said, our first milestone is not to reach Mars. Our first milestone is simply to get out to the orbit. Okay? So, and then the last part of this thing is, aside from making sure you find the right use case and the right target segment, the last thing is, are you framing the right way to do discovery? In other words, when you try to reach those prospects, are you doing the right framing, right? So when performing customer discovery, you should not be trying to sell them anything. Discovery means you're interested in learning about the problem and how it impacts your prospects. So in our experience, the best framing is to try and reach your prospects by informing them of your immediate goal. And your immediate goal is, of course, research. You're trying to understand the problem. So let me give you an example of a phone script you could use to leave people messages if they don't answer. You say something like this. Hi, John. I'm Shafiq. I'm researching challenges faced by designers and protecting their intellectual property created by the 3D printing revolution. I would really like about 10 minutes of your time to figure out how you're protecting your designs from people ripping them off and just 3D printing them. Please call me back at following phone number 555-1212. So what do you think, Steven? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, those are great examples. And I really appreciate your third suggestion. Personally, I've found that most customer prospects are open to a call or meeting when you tell them that you're working on a startup and performing market research to learn about the problem that that customer wants solved. And it strikes me that this is especially true when you explain that you're definitely not trying to sell them anything. In fact, I'm sure you've seen similar things, Shafiq. Most people are really interested in helping if they have the time, and they often open up quite a bit when given the opportunity to speak with someone else who really sincerely cares about the problem they're experiencing, which is exactly what the process of customer discovery is all about. So I think you've laid out pretty well for this entrepreneur what actions they could be taking on their own prior to signing a contract to a marketing agency, because that marketing agency is still going to have to coax that information out of the founder or do the work that the founder should do on their own. They can save that money, and if they struggle with it, then they can make a choice later after they follow your advice. Okay, I've got our next question here. This one comes from someone who describes himself as startup curious, in that he works for a startup as a developer and may one day be a founder himself with an idea he's been thinking about. His question is, Shafiq, do you really have to identify a problem before you develop your solution? And he references the iPhone. His addendum question is, isn't the original iPhone an example of a great product that didn't really solve a real problem?
Okay, let me think about that for a second. All right, so, and I can almost think of no commercial product or service that does not solve a problem. The iPhone, as a matter of fact, is a great example of the product that solved a very important problem when it came out. Let me see if I can recall the use case. So just to remind everyone, I think back in 2006, it's 2006 or 2007? 2006, the market-leading phone targeted by business users was a BlackBerry. They own a full 65% of the market share. And the consumer market was dominated by Nokia and Motorola. So back in 2006, if you wanted to access the web, you had to go back to your desk and use your computer. No phone really provided a good experience accessing the web, and including the BlackBerry. And Apple understood that a large percent of their engineers, like they had internal customers, engineers spent over 50% of their time away from their desk. And there was another trend that was at play at the same time. There was an exponential rise in the web use as well as email. Most workers were unable to be productive away from their desk. So combining a single solution that performed three key functions required by business users, Apple was able to deliver a solution that was a game changer. The real difference is not just the combination of mobile voice and text messaging and email and web surfing, but the awesome experience for those applications through the touch interface. So Apple understood when portions of the problem were already being solved by existing market-leading players, none had figured out how to deliver the complete solution that would delight their users. So let's look at two other specific areas where the problem isn't quite visible. Let's talk about a Rolex watch. What problem is that $50,000 Rolex watch is solving that a $200 Apple Watch does not? The problem is of quality. It's not cost nor time savings. Rolex certainly does not cost cheaper than existing alternatives, nor does it save you time when you want to know the time. So, if you focus on the quality, it may not be, and it's certainly not any more accurate than an Apple Watch. An Apple Watch is, keying off the nuclear watch that's available out of Colorado. So it's certainly not more accurate than that. So what quality aspect is the Rolex able to deliver on. And it turns out what Rolex does is what all luxury products do. Luxury goods always use the most expensive raw materials to produce their products. And that's because they're trying to deliver a specific feelings to their target market. And that feeling is of exclusivity. Those users want to feel special. So, and that brings up a really interesting point. So when you're solving the problem for your customer, it's just not enough to focus on a solution. You also have to change the feeling when the problem isn't solved, experienced by your target customer. So as an example, Stephen, if you rely on your computer and you're trying to do this video call that we're on right now, right? And if your computer goes down or it has to reboot, the famous Apple, death screen, we sure as heck don't want to. It's going to make you feel really anxious, right? I know. You're going to tell me it never happens, but I know better. You always have to reboot those apples. Of course, the window guy, I can make those claims, right? So in any solution you purchase, you have to be able to turn that feeling the opposite. So it's not just enough that you end up getting a computer, but one that you can totally rely on, right? So it has to create the opposite feeling while solving the problem. So when we getting back to our luxury goods, the problem that most luxury products are solving for and most luxury buyers have is they don't want to feel ordinary. They work too hard just to feel ordinary. So when they purchase something, they want to feel special, right? And now they could easily buy an Apple Watch, but they're not going to because it's not going to make them feel special. And that's why, by the way, Apple has a $5,000, Stephen, you can correct me on this, but a $5,000 band. The watch still costs $250 or $350, but they do have a $5,000 specially, gold-plated or whatever it is, armband, right? A wristband that the watch attaches to. So luxury goods are always trying to make sure that their buyers, their customers feel special while they're delivering the experience to them. And that's, so again, that even luxury goods, that's true. Now let's look at one last example, which would be entertainment. Entertainment is another area that's solving a problem for a specific audience. For example, let's take Disney. Disney is focused on serving families. So you won't find Disney producing X-rated movies. In music, Taylor Swift is a master of understanding her fans and leading the girl power movement. So the notion that products or services don't have to solve a problem is just not true. Every product, every service is solving a problem, and that's how they engage their customers. Otherwise, their customers have no reason to do business with them. Is that, Stephen, what do you think? You got anything to add to that one?
No, that's perfect. I think all I was going to add is I think as consumers, we underestimate how often we buy solutions to problems, even though we don't consciously think of our purchases that way. And frankly, on the iPhone, I didn't actually realize that story that iPhone figured this out through their own engineers, watching their own engineers' behavior and the impact it was having on them organizationally. I just wasn't familiar with that story. So that's a really great. I think that goes again to the aspect that sometimes there's the origin stories. We don't tell origin stories in startups very often because they're not, unless they're really sexy about, I thought this idea and now I'm a billionaire, which never is true anyway.
Well, in this case, Stephen,
you really did a good job clarifying that.
Yeah, in this case, on the Apple, it's not really an origin story of Apple, but it's really the origin story of the iPhone. It's a product origin story. It had internal, they had a skunkworks project going on for a long time about the phone. I think they were at it for 3 years, but they wouldn't release anything because nothing was going to be a game changer in the marketplace. And when the touchscreen finally came around and they understood the real business challenge that their engineers were having, they were able to go out and validate that really quickly with other enterprise customers and figure out really fast that lots of people were having the same problem. They couldn't be away from their desk. So they want to set people free.
That's great. I think it's fascinating. Again, I think we underestimate these things, and so this is terrific. I hope that illuminates to this startup curious future founder what's really involved. That you have to have a problem. You have to be solving for a problem. All right, Shafiq. We have one last question here, and this one comes from a serial entrepreneur in this case, who, based on her description, is in the second startup phase of repeatable sales and delivery, as she's focused on automating her production and delivery engine. And this founder's question is, does your framework really work for all kinds of products or services?
Okay, so that's a question I've answered a few times. Let me see if I can. Okay, so as I think about it, the short answer is yes. Our framework works for all kinds of products. As a matter of fact, let me answer it a little differently by saying what we don't have proof that it works for. So there are like two industries that we have not yet successfully applied our framework to. One is the entertainment industry, and the other is, of course, the fashion industry. That's because in both cases, until recently, the cost of reaching the customer or the channel, the way you get to the customer, was really high. So like in fashion, you had to break through by getting coverage of your design from famous fashion magazines. In entertainment, as an actor, you had to grind it out in small theaters or chase your dream by going to LA. Both were real poor prospects to get your big break. For musicians, you had to go on the road and play local clubs or refine your act, which was grueling and expensive. Same was true for comedians. They had to get out to the comedy clubs and perform their acts to live audiences to improve upon it as quickly as possible. But that has changed now with the advent of YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Many young talented actors, comedians, musicians are able to break through online. They don't need to get past traditional gatekeepers. So much of our framework also applies to them. They have to find their niche and build a following for their brand of entertainment online. So if you know of anyone pursuing fashion or entertainment and wants to benefit from our methodology, send them our way. We would love to help them. We would love to help them, and in turn, they can help validate our process, and we'll work a special deal with those guys. So what do you think, Steven? You got anything to add to that?
First off, if we're not, as long as I don't have to be a singer, I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't think our framework would definitely work for that. But actually, two things come to mind. One, I keep thinking about the story that people talk about the Beatles with the 10,000 hours rule, which probably made a lot of sense back when the Beatles were getting started. Compared to now, you still may have that iterative process of learning your skill, but you have the ability to do it much more efficiently now. And the other thing is, I think is really important is that you hit on was that the framework is effectively about validated learning and working agile. And this is all based on proof that either a founder, a product manager, or innovator is building a solution that addresses a market need, and that the market will respond to their solution. It's about iteration, which means that some industries are better for this than others. I mean, the example that kind of comes to my mind in that regard is that if you're going to the government as your primary customer, the time it would take to secure a government contract would make any framework difficult for a startup to use in that circumstance. However, in that case, a founder would be better served to use lean techniques to target a different market than the government for the same problem. You prove out that you can solve it for those customers' needs before returning to sell to the government, which, as you referenced SpaceX, we referenced SpaceX a few times. This is essentially what SpaceX did by serving the private satellite industry before attempting to sell to NASA. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for questions right now. If you're looking to build your startup lean, please click the link nearby or drop your question in the comments below. Also, please subscribe to our channel so you can receive immediate access and notifications of our latest episodes. Building Lean is brought to you by the LeanMastery Incubator. LeanMastery helps founders convert their ideas into thriving business fast and helps business owners avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Learn more about how you can become a LeanMastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to helping you be successful in pursuing your startup dreams by building lean.